friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me discussing my thoughts, my full thoughts, on Chasing Pacquiao by Rod Pulido. If you guys have seen my 5-star predictions vlog, I'm sure you guys will know what this review will kind of contain. If you guys have read my review on Goodreads or Storygraph, if you guys have seen my February wrap-up, March wrap-up, yeah, one of those two wrap-ups, and you kind of have a slow understanding. But this is for my non-spoilery people out here. There will be slight spoilers, but I don't go too in-depth about them. I did keep this pretty vague because there are a lot of things that I think I don't have to go super in-depth on, since it really just covers like what is stated on. I'm sorry, my lighting's a little weird, so if you see me like adjusting, trying to find like lighting where I'm not gonna be like half covered or half overshadowed, I'm so sorry. Change of angle, it's fine. I have a lot of things to talk about this book. Not all of them are great, most of it is bad, so just kind of get into it and get into the meat of things, and I can get a disappointing book of 2023 out of the way. Chasing Pacquiao by Rod Pulido is a YA contemporary novel set in 2016, way back in 2016, it's almost a lifetime ago, following a young high schooler named Bobby who is in the closet. One day he is outed and is significantly bullied and harassed and physically assaulted for the fact that he is a young gay man. He then turns to boxing after being heavily inspired by Manny Pacquiao, who is like the Philippines, like one of their like golden children to come out of the Philippines, who is a well-known boxer if you guys don't follow boxing. That is until Manny comes out with some pretty homophobic and quite frankly disgusting comments about the queer community. And now Bobby kind of has to grapple with the fact that the thing that saved him, this concept that he built around himself, this idol that he's this idol that he's idolized, that he's looked up at and like seen as like someone who can save him from this very terrible situation that he's in because he was outed, now hates the thing that he is to the very beginning, and he kind of has to grapple with that throughout the book. Kick off with some trigger warnings because, as you guys can clearly tell, there's going to be a lot. There's a lot of homophobia, there's some fat shaming, there is physical violence, physical assault, bullying. There's a lot of body shaming in regards to like acne and like again how fat someone was in the book, which I'll get more into later. That's all I can think of for right now. If there are any missing ones that I can't think of, I will leave them in my Goodreads and my Storygraph reviews so you guys can have them to see, and I'll leave links to those as well if you guys want to check that out or like look into the book and read other reviews from people. Moving on to my first thoughts. As you guys know, I did receive an arc of this from Penguin and Teen. I thought it was on their like request, and I really was intrigued by the idea, and I wanted, like, as you guys know, I was interested in the nuanced conversations that we might have about Pacquiao, about the Filipino community, and how we're still fighting the results of colonization, which resulted in homophobia in our community, and I wanted to see more of that. Obviously, it's a lot to ask for in a YA, but I was excited to see exactly how those conversations would take place and how they would look like, and what exactly was the outcome of this book, and how Bobby was going to turn around and like reclaim this love for boxing that he had after these like comments are brought out. It sounds like it's a lot for a YA book, which it is, but at the same time, given the synopsis of the book, which I will throw the actual like book synopsis on here, and just the title of it, it sounds like there are going to be a lot of those important conversations, those moments of dissecting the Filipino community and the things that queer people have had to deal with, both from maybe the mainland, back home, and maybe even the Phil-Ams, because Bobby is a Phil-Am student or a Phil-Am protagonist. So I was excited to see how that would affect it, coming from someone who has watched Pacquiao probably for a long time, as a lot of us have. So I was really intrigued to see what conversations was going to be had, and maybe I built it up a lot in my head, but I was still excited to see like exactly what shape they would take, because I just wanted to see, like, I want to see more discussions about this and more things that are to the forefront when it comes to like Filipino stories, and exactly like the things that we've had to face because of like the results of colonization and how it affects people in the diaspora, people back on the islands, and etc. So I'm just gonna start off with the good things that I liked about this book, just because it's a very short list. I really did enjoy the friend group that oh my goodness, that Bobby had. I think given the time period that it was in 2016, it would have been the reactions would have been different, and like the fact that he had such a loving and supportive group around him, that he had people who like maybe didn't agree with what he was gonna do, but supported him because they knew what it meant to him and this is what he would needed to do. And I like that it was set in a high school setting. I think that back in 2016, had someone come out, people would have been like, oh, okay, but it would have been more tolerance rather than the actual acceptance that his friends had, and I like that little kind of close-knit aspect that they had with one another. And yeah, I'll admit some of the dialogue was kind of cringy, but when I look back at the things I said and I posted and I talked about back in high school, even up until college, cringe was inevitable, because like you're finding yourself and you're just kind of like mimicking and parroting the things around you. So cringe is bound to happen. It's unfortunate, but it's bound to happen. I did really like Manny's resilience. I thought that to be in 2016, you know, where things are starting to become more tolerated, slowly gravitating toward the accepted version of this world, that he was someone who could pick himself back up after he was quite literally beaten down by people who hated him for what he was intrinsically and can't change. I like that he found ways to inspire himself to keep going, or to find a better way to move on with this thing that is currently happening to him, and I really enjoyed that. I liked seeing Manny slowly accept himself as as the book progressed, because at this point he is a queer young boy who is like struggling to accept himself as a whole. He knows he's gay, he knows all these things about himself, but he struggles to fit the pieces all together in a nice way that don't contradict one another in his eyes. And I think that was very interesting. I liked how that was brought up, as it is, like I said, in 2016. We are seeing, like, at the cusp of 2016 was probably like what? Oh, the election, right? It was the election. We had thought that the world was becoming more accepting of the queer community, and then the election rolls around, and then shit just kind of falls apart for everything that we had, like, I guess, like, thought that we had moved, or we were working to move past. So it, to me, was very interesting to see his teen learn to be more himself throughout this process. Heads up, the bad things do have very slight spoilers, but they shouldn't like affect like they shouldn't tell you, it shouldn't be mapped out about the entire book. It'll just be slight spoilers. Now, my biggest issue with this book was, at this point I don't even know how to categorize my issue with this book, because it could either be under pacing, it could be under how the book was titled, or how the synopsis was written. Either way, it was anything relating to Pacquiao was the issue that I had with this book. The biggest plot point that we were told in the novel about Bobby having to come to grips with the fact that Pacquiao was homophobic, he said these things, and he doubled down after he had said them in 2016, didn't get introduced until about 74 to 78% of the way of the book. In my vlog, I did mention that I was just really feeling a type of way, because by that point I was like, when is this going to come up? When is this book going to get to where I was told I was going to be? And at that point, I also just started feeling kind of icky. I, too, am also a queer Phil-Am person who grew up not idolizing, I would say respecting Pacquiao and the struggles he had gone through and where he is now and how he got there. And I did love watching him fight as a Filipino in these huge boxing rings and become such a well-known name. Like, I did not go to events where there was going to be a fight involved and to not hear his name, people screaming it, and all those things in between. So to have read this book, I was expecting something else, but instead by 70 to 74% of the way through, I have felt like I read a book mainly about idolizing Pacquiao, and solely for the fact that he was a boxer and a Filipino. And that just made me feel it made me feel how I felt when he came out with those comments, and I was questioning my own sexuality. I think, I was already out in 2016. Like, I was out and having had those kind of icky feelings in me that I didn't exactly quite know what to do with, and having read a majority of that book, I was just like, I feel icky and sticky and gross, and I just felt not great about reading the book by the end of it. It was like 74 to 78% of the book, and then by the time that the plot point happened, it wrapped up just as quickly. People basically just kind of told Manny, look, he's a shitty person. Manny is crappy for saying those things. You are better than that. Don't give up boxing. Don't not have the fight. And then later the next day his best friend comes up to him and is like, yeah, look at the consequences of his actions. He lost all of his sponsorships, but he still doubled down, but he lost all of his sponsorships. So bad guy was taken down, and I was just sitting there like, but we had no conversations about how this affected Bobby, how it affected how he saw everything, how he was going to overcome anything. So to me, the victory of that plot point was undeserved. Like, it wasn't there. I just felt like it just got, like, the plot point wrapped up as soon as it came. And like I said, it's the literal title of the book is Chasing Pacquiao. The actual, like, I'm like getting tangled in this plant. The actual, like, synopsis also had so much information about how Bobby was gonna have to like struggle with the fact that the person he idolized for so much is homophobic and would literally hate him if they met. And there was no conversation, no actual deep dive into that. It was just, yeah, he lost his sponsorships. See, look, good prevails. Good prevails. But then we had a very short discussion, if that, like a paragraph maybe, of how, like, Manny's, like, we still had homophobia in the Philippines, and Manny's words and doubling down probably helped further those terrible people into thinking that this was okay. But there was no actual, like continuation from that. There was so much room for conversations about how Bobby was going to reclaim this issue, how Bobby was going to become better, how he was going to be better, and all of these things about, like, how Filipinos are, like, we grow up with that weird, like, homophobia. At least I did at least. That homophobia in there where it's like, you know, you love the sinner but not the sin, all those concepts and whatnot, and how that affects, like, how he wants to play boxing, how he wants to reevaluate why he's continuing, where is he gonna get inspiration now. All those things, all those conversations that I was expecting to have just were not there. And I just kind of sat there and was like, so what was the point in having Bobby be inspired by Pacquiao? What was the point in introducing these homophobic comments that Pacquiao had? Where were those conversations going to be when he faced homophobia again from someone who looked like him? Where was it going to be when he heard again about how Pacquiao had another fight? What was he supposed to, like, there was none of those conversations. I just didn't know where those conversations were, or where they were headed, or if they were even going to happen. And by the time that the book introduced this plot point, it was almost done. It's like, where was the space for this? Instead, we had, like, 70% of the novel just him training, like how Rocky trained, and just, like, those montages that didn't make sense to me, and plot points that we could have removed to save room for these important conversations, or to introduce this plot point with Pacquiao a little earlier. So to me, it just wasn't there, and it was just lacking so much. I also feel like the ending felt a little undeserved as well. The ending was him with his boyfriend going up to this mural, and I think the Filipino town that they were in, of Manny Pacquiao, and him leaving, like, a traditional Filipino poem about how, like, he is allowed to love who he loves, and just because you say these things does not mean you're right, to wrap it up. But that didn't feel deserved, because again, there were no conversations about Pacquiao. There were no conversations about how this was going to affect Bobby, how it affected how Bobby looked at the inspirations that he had that were Filipino, how he looked at boxing, how he was going to reclaim boxing to be his own thing, to be stronger for himself, rather than looking for inspiration from someone who, like I said, would hate him because of just who he is and something he cannot physically change. So to me, it was just one of those things where I was like, like, maybe it was my high expectations. Maybe I wanted to see a book similar to how Randy Ribay discusses the complexities complex aspects of what happened in the Philippines during that drug war. I think it's still ongoing, actually. I wanted those important conversations, and I got none of them. I just was left feeling kind of like numb at the end. I didn't feel happy that Manny had accepted him for himself fully. I didn't feel a certain type of way that he beat his opponent and that he has this strength behind him that was just more than physical. Like a physical, you know what I mean? So it was just like, it didn't feel deserved. It didn't feel like it was a resolution that the character worked for, because all those like conversations I said, those struggles that I was expecting were not there. And maybe that was a mix of my own high expectations going into the novel, but then for the fact that it's literally the title of the book, it's in the synopsis, it just it's setting the book up for more than it's actually giving. So I'm just like, well, what am I supposed to do about this? What do I do with this information? The other thing, more smaller aspects, the other one that I had was that, yeah, the antagonist that Rod wrote, he was fat, he had acne, and I get it, it's 2016, you know, we're still working towards that like body positivity movement, air quotes, because I don't know where we are with that movement. I think people have started moving toward like body neutrality, which I prefer. For myself personally, not for the entire world, like do what you gotta do, I prefer. But they would just lay into the character just because he was fat and he had acne, and like I said, I get it, it's high school, it's mean, high school is not a nice place. It's 2016, so I understand the fact that, you know, these things are gonna happen, but it was unnecessary. And I think I am the person that, like, when we want change to happen, whether it be with positivity, with not shaming people for things they can't physically fix with like a toothpick or a tissue or like a cotton swab or like some eye drops, that I think change happens very like small in like the media that we put out, the books that we read, the things that we watch. At least to start internalizing those small things that, like, you know, don't shame someone for being fat, don't shame someone for having acne that they cannot fix in the span of 30 seconds. You know, those things. Like, I think the change for that has to be small, and it has to happen in the things we consume. So to me, it was also very icky that instead of, like, you know, maybe attacking his character, as you should because he's a homophobic bully, they went straight for his looks and continued to hammer in on that. And I was like, listen, he's already a terrible person. It's unnecessary to be like, yeah, he's also fat and he has pimples and all those things. And I was like, it's just unnecessary to me. It was not, I don't know where like that was needed, but like I said, I think change has to happen slowly for that. But putting out a book where the main heroes of the story talk shit about fat people and people with acne, even though they were getting bullied by that person, was just like, that's not the change that I want to see, and that's not the change that I want portrayed in the media that young people are going to be reading. The people my age are going to be reading. It's just not there. And to boot, the last thing that I had an issue with, that there was a plot about child abuse in there. It was a very run-of-the-mill, the kid is abuses people because he too is being abused. Again, slight spoilers. But there was nothing that happened with that plot. I don't know if the point of that plot was to make the main characters and the side characters and the protagonists feel more empathetic toward the bully, or if it was to put him in a different light. But it didn't. They still kept making fun of him. They had no empathy for him still at the end of the day. And there was no, like, we gotta talk to someone about this. We gotta tell someone that this is being done to him. We have to, like, protect him because no one should have to go through this. It went nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. And I just kind of sat there and was like, then what was the point of introducing that? Can't we just have him be homophobic for the sake of being homophobic? At that point, like, why did we have to introduce that plot point if there was nothing gonna happen with it? It was just like those little things that I feel like, well, one of them was the big thing. I talked about the big thing. Those little things that I just kind of sat here and was like, I think we could have used more beta readers on this. We could have used more people to take a look back and ask the author these questions, like, why are they mentioning his body and his acne? Why did we include a child abuse plot point that is going to go nowhere? Because those are things that do happen to kids, and those are things that cause kids to hurt other people. But if we don't try to save those kids, then what cycle are we perpetuating? It's just things like that where I wish like beta readers had like sat there and been like, oh, okay. There were also comments from like, so I know Filipino. I understand Filipino language, like Tagalog. I can kind of read it. My parents speak it to me. I watch media, so I can understand it, and like I can like kind of speak it, but I don't know the slang. So I didn't bring this up, I don't think, in my vlog, but I did bring it up in my wrap up. The other thing, Bobby is a queer gay man. We'll just leave the title out there, you know? In the Philippines, we have a word for someone who is gay, and it's bakla. B-A-K-L-A. And in the book, Bobby uses it as like a slur, like the equivalent of the F word, which is not. I don't think, I was looking through Spencer's, I'll also leave Spencer's review, who was the one who pointed out the fact that it mentioned this factoid, this little thing. They were the ones who were like, oh yeah, this isn't a thing, and then the whole thing. But the fact that it was there, we don't really have, at least that's what Spencer did and all the comments did in the Goodreads review, and then other friends on Twitter also brought up the fact that we don't have a word for this. We don't have a slur for gay. Like, you can use bakla like as an insult, but in its heart, it's just the equivalent of saying someone's gay. And Bobby used it as if it was the equivalent of saying the F word, he was like, no, it's not bakla, it's queer. And I'm like, you're saying the same, like, you're saying like the cousin of the same thing you're trying to say. So that was also a thing that I feel like I said, I wish there had been more beta readers going into this, because then they would have caught the fact that this does not mean this is not a slur. They would have caught the fact that, hey, maybe having a story about child abuse isn't the move to go. They would have caught the obvious fat shaming and the body shaming, and had told him maybe like even to tighten up the story would have probably helped out a lot. So I just think it could have used another round of beta readers, but we didn't get that. And now we're left with a book that has very minimal conversation, if any conversation at all. And it's just a lot of things, like I said, that I wish we had gotten, but we did not. So moving on to my overall rating and thoughts and whether or not I would recommend this book. So my initial rating for this book was a 3 out of 5 stars. I gave it a 3, but then I had to rewrite my review, and I looked through other people like Spencer's reviews as well for the novel. And I looked at the other ARC readers who read the book, who, nothing gets me more mad than when people, Western people, read an ARC for something about BIPOC and then don't critically analyze the layers of this. And they're like, yeah, it's great. Pacquiao is like, he's a bigot and like all that stuff. And I'm like, but you didn't have any of this. So I lowered my rating from a 3 to a 5 Lowered my rating from a 3 to a 2 out of 5 stars. Again, I just think there was so much that could have been done with this book. I don't think, I just think it was like, it lacked depth, and there were definitely instances where the author felt a little bit ignorant to like certain aspects of like his own culture, again with the wording of the word bakla, with the lack of conversation, the lack of nuance to everything. It felt very surface level, and I got angrier with this book the more I wrote my review, the more I read other people's reviews, and I was like, I just wanted more from this book. Like, it didn't feel like there was a resolution. It didn't feel like, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt quite numb and in need of a shower to wash away the ickiness that I was feeling that I had read this book. And there was nothing. So I definitely would not recommend this to anyone. But yeah, I just wanted more from this. I wanted just something, and I didn't get it, and it was just like a whole disappointment. But that is it for my review of Chasing Pacquiao by Rod Pulido. If you guys read this book and have similar feelings, let me know in the comments down below. If my review has swayed you to not read it, also let me know in the comments down below. But if you guys like this stuff, I do try to come out with review videos once a month. I think May might be a kind of month because I had a review that I didn't film for April, and I have another review. Both books I enjoyed that's coming out as well, that comes out in May. So if you guys like those things, let me know in the comments. And until next time, hit like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!